How does other dance styles help you in your Brazilian Zouk journey? What are the ones that are most helpful and what are the ones that causes the most issues? Well, let's find out. Hello everyone and welcome back to Zouk Nerds. In this episode, we are going to share our experience in teaching this dance style as well as learning and how other dance styles have helped us or created challenges as we try to master and connect with our dance. We're also going to be discussing ways that you can use the knowledge from other dances, the techniques and the methodologies to improve your dancing and make sure that your journey is an enjoyable one. So, let's go! Hello everybody and welcome back to Zouk Nerds. My name is Alisson Sandi and today we have our always beautiful co-host Gui Prada. Hello Gui.
Hello Alisson. Hello everybody and welcome back.
Today we're going to be talking about a topic that was brought to us by not just one student. Most recently this specific student, but multiple times over the years, people who are asking us if learning other dance styles can help you with Brazilian Zouk or not. That is, even when you are learning Zouk, so learning other dance styles at the same time, or more specifically to this episode, when you actually come from a different dance style. So let's say you've done ballroom before, you've done salsa, bachata, West Coast swing, or like in Taiwan, we have a lot of people that comes from hustle. And how does that affect your dance? Is it positive? Is it negative? Or are you actually aware of how it affects, or sometimes the excuses that you may be making when learning a style? So to start the conversation, let's share, Gui, the situation that sparked this conversation for us today here.
Yeah, and it's not only one situation, but I think several situations over the course of the years. And there was a recent one, two recent ones actually, in which I was talking to students about something that I've been noticing in their bodies for a long time. And they have like this continuous desire and they try to make it for the more advanced classes. They sign up for them, they do the auditions, they do the assessments. And when approaching these specific things about their movement, about body mechanics, they mentioned their previous dance. Oh, maybe it's because of my background in ballroom, because of my background in salsa, because of my background in bachata. And then they asked, oh, I think it would be interesting for you guys to do an episode of Zouk Nerds talking about this influence of your previous dance into your new dance, in this case for us, Brazilian Zouk. And this is a very interesting topic because the way that I can relate with this topic right now is more from the perspective of a teacher, not so much from the perspective of a student. More recently, in Alisson, I think from the perspective of a student learning lambada, learning a little bit of bachata, or going back into tango a little bit more intentionally and realizing how much the muscle memory of basically just doing Brazilian Zouk so much is influencing, is affecting the way that my body moves and understands even what the teacher is saying. I remember I was in a tango festival last year, taking the class, I was watching what the teacher was doing, I could understand it, but when I would do, I could realize my body going into the muscle memory that is now used to in Brazilian Zouk, in walking, shifting weight and all of that stuff. And me taking some time for my body to go back into a cadence, into a style that it knew once before, but it really just forgot, you know? So from the perspective of a teacher, it resonates with me more because learning, Alisson, we learned all the dances at the same time. So we didn't have much of this one dance getting in the way of the other because we were learning all at the same time. So basically it was just, we changed the chip where samba de gafieira, put the samba de gafieira chip, bolero starts playing, take it out, put the bolero chip, and the body immediately knows what to do. So mostly from the perspective of the teacher, né, Alisson? I think for you, something similar, no?
Yeah, my dance teacher used to say that when the music changes, you change the clothes, you change the body. So that's why when I teach Brazilian Zouk, I always talk about the Zouk body. And it's a workshop that I teach everywhere. What is the Zouk body? And I show it to them. I start by showing, let's say, I'll try to do my tanguero walk. And they're like, oh, tango. And then I'll try to show something like that moves more like salsa. And they're like, salsa. And I'm like, okay, guys, so now can you all do the same thing to me for Brazilian Zouk? And they freeze.
Nice.
They freeze. They're like, I don't know. Because in tango, you take the pose, the frame, the posture, and as soon as you're about to take the first step, people already say tango.
Yes.
You know, I get my frame, and as soon as I do the first step, people go like, bachata. How do you do that for Zouk? And then we do the workshop where we actually cover what is the Brazilian Zouk body. But all in all, what we're trying to discuss here is how those things can affect in a positive and a negative way. I remember, for example, my very beginnings, I was learning a lot of the other styles, but my biggest passion was forró and salsa. And then after many years of actually focusing on Zouk, doing Brazilian Zouk full time, I went back into a salsa club that I used to go many, many years before. And my friends, they're actually telling me, oh my God, Alisson, your salsa is so big now. Your salsa is so elastic. You know, tighten up. Be a little bit more precise. You're too elastic. You're taking too much space on the dance floor. You're bumping into people. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I think my Zouk now has enlarged my salsa in a way that it's not making it feel like salsa anymore because of how much I studied that other style. But at the same time, one thing that kind of I feel like improved in my salsa was that I was more adaptable because Brazilian Zouk brought that into my dance. And that's something that we hear from a lot of dancers from multiple styles. They say that when they started, Zouk was very confusing and, you know, they went through a lot of things. But then after a while, when they went back and danced with their friends from the previous dance style that they came from, they said that they could feel that there's some Zouk there. But at the same time, they were like, oh, but you know, like you're waiting more. You're more ready for anything. Your connection is softer and more adaptable to movements. And even if something goes wrong, there's no feeling that something didn't happen as it was meant to happen. So there's all of those things that I think that Brazilian Zouk can help. But the excuses is something that I think as students, we need to be aware and not use them as a crutch. So when you're learning something new, when you're going to a class, actually go like, okay, my body is doing this because of this. Cool. Keep it internal. Don't project it into another dancer or onto your teacher. Just simply understand. And using that knowledge from the other dance, try to work on the differences and go like, okay, this is what it is for this. This is what it is for that. No problem. Now I'm just going to process and feel it in my body instead of using it as an excuse or seeing that as a problem. Like, oh, my body can't do that or my brain cannot understand that.
Yeah, these are very good points because when I'm observing students, when I am teaching them, when I'm watching them, everything else like that, the answer to the question, how much the previous dance affects my learning of Zouk, it really is, I think, a classic answer for a lot of the questions that we make here. It depends. Depends, I think, exactly the things that you were mentioning, Alisson, because for me, how much it affects depends on how you approach your own observations of what is happening. So we have had in our lifetime as teachers a spectrum between someone that notices those things, doesn't say anything, we don't even know, we have no idea. Before we started the episode, so I was sharing with you one case of someone who is in class, who was in several of my classes, and I'm watching her learning, and I can see that her body has another dance. I can see that her body has maybe salsa, maybe bachata, because of the physicalities of how she moves. But I didn't know for sure. And then I saw her dancing, social dancing. I was like, oh, it's salsa. But in any point, when I was talking to her about something to correct in the footwork, arm work, the turns, she didn't say nothing about, oh, because in salsa, this is what happens. And then later on, I'm watching some videos of choreographies, and a choreography with her starts, and it's amazing. And it's crazy fast, crazy complex, with formations, amazing, beautiful. And then I learned that she was the one that choreographed that choreography. And I'm just so mind blown that that person that is in my class could produce that amazingness. I had absolutely no idea. She never talked. And the thing is, she's a highly experienced, skilled dancer in her style, and she's doing Brazilian Zouk, but she never used anything, like any excuse to say why she was doing a thing one way or the other way. She just listened and like, okay. So now I wonder if inside her head, she's like, okay, so that's how it is in Brazilian Zouk. That's how my body's doing. Let me see if I can adapt. And there's this other case, Alisson, that I didn't mention to you, was here at District Zouk, beginner classes, basics 1, 2, 3, there is this guy there. Amazing, super cozy, super comfortable, really good. And I'll give him the corrections and he would come and reply with so much joy. Thank you so much, man. Yes, that was what I was needing to feel better. And then I see later, he's a super bachata teacher, super incredible. He didn't say anything, man, anything. So in those cases, I think because of their approach to the learning, their previous experience helped them so much. Where in other cases, sometimes your approach to the learning, your previous experience can get in the way if you are always justifying what you do because of the previous dance. And this, we had also many cases that we could talk about here now.
I think that there are two cases. For example, sometimes it comes from the dancer itself and the things that they're dealing with in their brain, in their emotions. But the other one is the teachers that they had. Because I find that when people come from a different dance style and they've had teachers that are very methodical, very systematic, they understand the layers, they talk about the mechanics, and they teach the dance mechanically as well as dynamically, and they cover all of the things that we do normally in Brazilian Zouk. Those people, they come in, they learn, and they improve very fast. But then the ones who learned from a teacher who was mostly rushing through things and just doing steps and just doing movements and not really deep diving and understanding or teaching the mechanics, those are the ones who struggle the most, because they will come from, let's say, dancing another dance style for 10 years. And then they come into Brazilian Zouk and the body is just so used to that other style that they cannot easily adapt to Brazilian Zouk. But it's not because of the other dance style, but in my opinion, it's because of how they learned the other dance style. Because those who come from another dance style that have 10 years or 5 years of learning, but they learn from a teacher who is very slow, methodical, and mechanical, they come into Brazilian Zouk, they look at it, they listen to the teacher, they ask their questions, and they're very quick to assimilate or to separate and to adapt the things that they already know how to do in their... So in the end of the day, it comes to how conscious are they with the movements and the steps and the techniques that they have learned. Is it something that they can do just because it was drilled into their body without that consciousness? Or is it something that they learned through thinking and analyzing and repeating and correcting, and then it got to their body as a muscle memory? So those two different paths can really create a different result, I think. For people who have learned the dance more in a fast-paced, natural, survival way, I find that those people, they struggle more in learning another style and adapting. But for the people who learned in a slower, more methodical, more critical thinking kind of way and adaptable way, those are the ones who very quickly understand. I'm not saying they're able to do, but they very quickly understand what needs to be done and the paths that they have to take to get there.
So based on that, would you also say that someone that learned whatever dance style based on the patterns, based on the shapes and the figures, rather than the foundations, the mechanics, can also have a stronger muscle memory to the one that learned the mechanics of movement, for example, and have a harder time?
Yeah, I find that it's a muscle memory that was stamped on them. It was imprinted on them. It wasn't created by them. So it was something that it was just, let's say, in the future, I don't know, if we can download something into our brain and into our body. You didn't quite learn that through mistakes and through repetition and through questioning and problem solving. It was just simply thrown into you, and through survival mode, you managed it, right? But the person who actually learned through this slow method, and when I mean slow, I don't say like you've done beginners for 1 year, but I'm just saying like you took each small bite and you chew it enough so then it was good for you, instead of taking small bites, but multiple small bites in a very, very short period, and you moved very, very fast without actually being conscious about those things. I find that this happens a lot with people who, for example, learn through social dancing instead of learning through classes. They're able to do things because it was kind of thrown into them. But then as soon as I ask them, okay, can you do this on your own? They have no idea how to start or how to end or how to do it. You know, that typical kind of student that you ask them, okay, so this is working now. Let's work on this part. Let's say your bonus. Okay, so just go behind me. Let's do the bonus. Repeat with me the bonus. And they're completely lost. And then I ask them, okay, can you do it on your own? They can't even start. But then if I hold them, they can do bonus with toalha, double head, and frango assado at the same time. Yeah. But because I'm making them do it, yeah? And we're talking for the followers situation here, but leaders, a lot of the times they're very much like that because they learn through videos, for example. Leaders who learn through video, they can copy and they can do things if they have a body, but they don't understand where they are, what their feet are doing in relationship to the movement. So then when we ask them, hey, can you show me what you're doing? They need somebody. They cannot replicate without a partner. And then when we ask them, okay, do you realize that your shoulder is doing this, or your hips are doing this, or your feet are doing this? And we ask them to focus on that part. Suddenly, they cannot do the movement at all because they learned as this one design and one big picture instead of the elements. So then when they focus on one element, it's almost like they cannot see the rest. But the people who did learn through small bites and small elements, they can isolate that one thing, and maybe they cannot fix it right away. But you can tell that they can still do the movement. They can do it again and again and again, alone, together, faster, slower, and focus on that one thing that we're asking them to focus without getting lost.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That makes sense. As you were mentioning that, I was remembering my previous experiences because we had the luck to teach so many people from so many different backgrounds. And now that you're saying all these things, and I'm remembering these experiences, noticing when the background was helping and when the background was not helping. And maybe that was one of the reasons why, I remember normally someone who has ballet, that did ballet, did jazz, all these things, they don't develop such a strong muscle memory, at least in my experience. You only know that they did these things because they tell you, and because you can notice that they are acquainted with movement. Movement has been in their lives in some shape or form, and there is some cleanliness to the way that they move. There was one time though, that in class, I could clearly see that that person did ballet, and maybe because the shapes and other things were drilled in a way that the only way to stretch your leg forward is like this, putting the thing. The only way to put your arm up is this way. So maybe it was this way of teaching in which there is a way. This is the way. Every time you go forward like this. So every time this person was going forward on the back and forward basic, they would point and put the leg and then step. Point, put the leg and then step. Even though after asking so many times that they don't need to do that, it kept happening. So the muscle memory is really strong. And the other thing too that I was thinking refers to, even though someone is learning the dance through their pieces, through the bites and the foundations, some of them have a very particular approach to a given foundation. For example, in tango, you spend a long time on the walk, on this mechanic of stepping. And there's a very specific way to do it. So you are learning the foundation of walking, of stepping, shifting weight. However, the specificity, I don't know if the words exist in English, but the specifics of it makes it in a way that that foundation itself acquires a very particular look to it. Same thing, for example, in Kizomba, that it's a lot about weight shifts and controlling the weight shift, but the way in which that is done is different. And we had the chance to teach people from Kizomba as well. And I realized over time that there is one key element in the foundations that sometimes when you mention it, the person, okay, good to go. Because in Brazilian Zouk, we travel on the step, like you displace your spine when you step the long step. In other dances, you step, you shift weight, but you barely move your spine. It stays there. It's almost like you were doing a rock step or stepping on the spot. So there is little displacement. And I remembered more recently when teaching people who had a previous dance experience, mentioning this one aspect of the foundation of walking, and then boom, everything happening. So for us too, as teachers, is identifying within the same foundation, what is the element, the differentiating factor between the approach of this dance and the approach of this dance. Because I think for me, it's almost like the learning of a language. When we are learning a language, we have the syntax of our mother language. We have the building of a whole idea of our mother language, and learning the new language will require us to reframe how we think the idea in the first place, and also asks us to not be too attached to the way that we speak the other language. For example, now we are learning Chinese, and although there are so many similarities, there are so many things that are different, that I realized that if I keep trying to translate it to Portuguese, it's not gonna work. I have to really truly think differently to build the sentences together. But at the same time, if I memorize sort of like these main rules of the syntax, I can at least put some sentences together. So it's this differentiation between someone who is really into grammar and really into like learning structure versus someone who's really into language and learning like what are the common aspects of this language that if I learn first, I can start speaking it, and then I can go to the grammar and improving it. So sometimes I think that the students get very attached to the grammar of their previous language, and create almost like a resistance to learn the specifics of this new dance, of this new language. And I had very particular experiences with this, but I wanted to ask you, Alisson, what do you think is the dance style that builds the stronger muscle memory in students? Based on your experience, what are the students with the strongest muscle memory that you found challenging to reprogram into the Brazilian Zouk muscle memory or movement?
This is a deep one,
yes.
Very deep one. And before I answer, I want to drop a hot take. So this is a parenthesis in the conversation that I was thinking about. A lot of the times, the students who have these issues, They are the students who actually mention their previous background.
Yes.
When you're talking about the ballerinas, when we're talking about the tangueros or something like that, usually the people who already come with this, oh, I've done ballet for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, was that on YouTube? Because like, bro, if you had a teacher who drilled all of the things, and let me just clarify here, I'm not just speaking of ballet, but anything. If you had a teacher who really drilled and explained and made you understand everything about dance, I don't think you'd be struggling that much.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to come with the big chest and say, I've done 15 years of this, then I shouldn't have to really hear that from you because your dance is going to show it. Okay. Like usually for me, the best students are the ones who don't say a thing. But then as soon as I see them doing the movements and learning, I'm like, what dance background do you have? And they're like, oh, I've done a little bit of something. I'm like, okay, what else? They're, oh, I've done this and I've done that. But they're like so quiet and so humble about it. But I feel like wow, you're like really, really, really well trained and you're being humble about it. But yeah, the ones who usually come with a big chest and say like, yeah, I've done this, I've taught this, and I've competed and won this thing and that thing. And I'm like, yeah, I see.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to your question, what are the styles that I find the most challenging? I think I would have to categorize in different things that are challenging. So for example,
good idea.
People who come from West Coast Swing. Here in DC, we have so many. And by the way, we're in DC at the moment.
Yes.
Please, people, keep up. We're moving everywhere.
Yes.
So in DC, we have a lot of people that come from West Coast Swing. So I find that their connection, beautiful, amazing. But they struggle to understand how we do weight transfer and how we do footwork in Brazilian Zouk.
And elasticity too.
Yeah. So that's a very category-based thing. Somebody who comes from tango, I'm almost tempted to say, don't change a thing about your footwork and weight transfer. Almost. But now they need to learn how to do open embrace, how to engage during turns, and how to not always be on each other's chest. So it's a different difficulty that they face.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who comes from, let's say, salsa or bachata, let's start with the weight transfer because the weight transfer is different. And then let's go to the knees. The knees are different. The hips are different. The upper body is different. Like it's a completely different body mechanic from the toes to the head. So I find that tango and West Coast Swing, they have less strong differences. It's kind of like maybe a 50%, but when it comes to salsa and bachata, depending on how they learn salsa and bachata, I'll add that again, because I've had a lot of people that come from salsa and bachata who had amazing teachers. And for them, it was I wouldn't say easy, but it was easier and they improved very fast. So yes, salsa and bachata usually for people who learned from clubs or bars or very fast pace, very like energy, not mechanic. They have the hardest time learning Zouk. And most recently, I am shocked, surprised, and I don't know if this is all around the world. So guys, let us know here. But in Taiwan, in Taipei more specifically, we have a lot of people who come from hustle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this maybe the closest dance style from a teacher's perspective to teach somebody Zouk and they just get it? I don't know why. People come from hustle. The connection is like, okay, a little bit different, but not too far. The weight transfer, a little bit different, but not that far. The body movement, the hip movement, different, but not that far. Of course, they have lots of techniques that are specific to hustle, but I find that it's one of the dance styles that are maybe, at least in Taipei, very neutral when you're learning Zouk. There's like West Coast Swing, there's a lot of something. Tango is a lot of something. Salsa and bachata, a lot of something. But hustle, I've been finding from the students that I've had that it's kind of like, okay, it's all a little bit different, but nothing screams different to me. And this could be different in hustle communities across the world. I'm just being more specific there. because it's something that in the last year and a half I've been very, very surprised.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, Alisson, because I was thinking about hustle technique that we know like 0.2%. I'm going to put out there already. That's how much we know of hustle. But we attended one night of the Taiwan Hustle Congress, and people showed us in the corner, this is the basic. Keep the timing and you're good to go. And then that's what we did. And then we started following. I was there, Alisson was there, Felipe Lira was there. And we started following. And it worked. It really worked. When they went into more complex things, of course, we couldn't follow. But up to a certain point, it was working. And I realized that the similarities of it is, where do you keep your weight on your feet so you don't go to the heel in there when we're doing the elastic parts? We do have the rock step motion, and the keeping of the timing in a constant way. It's a timing that is funky because the one keeps moving around. So let's not talk about this part, leave it behind. But it does create like a good sense of maintaining the footwork. You keep the footwork. But then you're like, well, but in salsa and bachata, you still keep the footwork. The thing is, in hustle, I noticed we are displacing on tracks different from a bachata, for example, that is, from what I observed and from what I did, is more side to side. And in salsa, it doesn't travel as much. So I think the similarities could be on that end for the hustle specifically, because the rock stepping and the stretchy parts felt really familiar, In language, there is this desire to understand what is the primordial one, where every other language is sort of branched out. We know that, like, for example, Portuguese, Spanish, Romanian, Italian, French, they all branched out from Latin. So there is like this common language. So we can more or less understand each other, or understand at least the structure of the syntax. But for example, us is speaking Portuguese, Latin derived language, with someone is speaking Finnish, which is a completely different root, is, very hard to understand. And I think when Alisson was mentioning the aspect, for example, in salsa, that the knees are different, the weight transfer are different. I think sometimes we are talking about someone who speaks Portuguese and someone who speaks, Polish. Like there is a big difference in the mechanics of everything. Yeah. And as I was listening to you, Alisson, my answers are similar. I have one more, the turning with people with salsa background. Normally they turn fast. They're like, for me though, I think the dances that I notice over time through observations and experience people, and that's my sole experience, is normally people with ballroom background. And I think that is because ballroom is a standardized dance. So you gotta learn that specific shape and that specific mechanics. So your body is imprinted with those shapes and those mechanics. For example, this thing of the head that stays here, for example.
Yeah.
That's there. Even though we mentioned that to the person, they're like, am I doing it again? Like, oh man, I'm sorry, I know, it's just so hard. Blues and fusion. Man, I noticed that sometimes when I travel to communities who were strong in blues and fusion, there was this very strong muscle memory. And it's interesting because blues is in the embrace. So one could connect it, could be a Latin-derived language, for example, but the way that they build the embrace and the way that the knees work and the knees work is so different that sometimes it looks similar, that you think that you can make the correlation easily. But when you go ahead and go deeper into the specifics of the technique for Brazilian Zouk, there is like this big clash. So in my experience, I would say general ballroom dancing, blues and fusion, I think are like on top of the specifics that you gave.
Yeah, it was interesting being at the Taiwan Hustle Festival because our first experience with hustle was following.
Yeah.
So for me, for Guy and for Felipe Lira, I had never gone to a social. I've seen it videos, I've seen in competitions, but we were there watching the competitions, and then there was a social later, and you're like, can I lead you? And I'm like, hell no. And I was like running away from them for a while because I don't know, I get into my head and I want to do things well. It's nothing about me being a teacher trying to be good. For me, I'm very respectful to the craft and to the style. So I don't want to step onto the dance floor unless I've done some classes. That's me. I'm not saying anything else is wrong. But anyway, the students kept insisting, and then we got to a point that we were like, okay, fine, but let's go to the corner because I'm very embarrassed. I don't want to ruin your night. But yeah, I mean, like, it was so much fun. And I felt like if I was to maybe go to a social of any other dance style and follow, it wouldn't have been as smooth as it was with Hustle. So that was very interesting. And to your point about ballroom, so I did standard ballroom for about 3 years. And I did my bronze medal and my silver medal. And I found that when I was learning from this teacher, I always asked her questions, why are ballroom students more like this and less like that? And then she gave me some insights. She told me, look, there's many ways of learning ballroom. There's the ways that you learned medals and competitions only, and there's the way that you learned with social dancing involved. And she was suggesting to me that the people that struggles the most to adapt and learn other dance styles that are more social dancing based, they learn ballroom maybe for a short time or maybe for a very long time, but only medal based or competition based. Yeah. So they only learn set movements, set choreography, set entrances and exits. They didn't learn how to connect, how to socialize, how to improvise, how to adapt, how to roll with the flow. That was not part of their learning, because that's pretty much what I did. When I went to ballroom, I just wanted somebody to teach me something very different from what I knew, and I had no interest in social dancing. So I told my teacher, I'm here to nerd out. I'm here to have a teacher teach me a completely new language and to be a student, because I feel like I'm missing that part in my life, being a student of something completely different. So yes, I never learned how to social dance. I never learned how to perform or to compete. I just did my medals and I did my exams and all of that. So I think that the people who learn dancing, even when you're looking at many years ago in Australia, we had a huge thing about teams, dance teams. And I think in North America, that's still quite a strong thing. So a lot of people, they've been dancing salsa or bachata or kizomba or even Zouk for years, but they've only gone from one choreography to the other, 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 because they are like a dance team dancer. They don't go to regular dance classes. They don't go to regular socials because they love to perform, and that's it. But then when they go to the social, bro, it's difficult to connect. Mm-hmm. It's difficult. And just like I did in ballroom, that's a total choice for you to make. I had a student in Perth, Australia, that she learned with me for about, 5 years. We did multiple choreographies. We competed together. Her only interest was performing. She came to all the group classes, but she had no interest in social dancing. She did sometimes 3-4 hours of private lessons every week, only for choreography and technique, to a point that I was like, look, from day one, I've asked you to social dance and you've told me I cannot, I don't want to, I don't like it. I just want to do this. But it got to a point that I was like, look, from now on, I don't feel like you're going to continue improving with the techniques that we want to do, with the choreographies that we want to do, unless you actually learn to social dance. Mm-hmm. So then with that in mind, I told her, you're not learning to social dance to become a social dancer, but to improve on your show performances. Because there is something that you learn in social dancing that you can see in a show. I can watch a group perform or a couple perform and know more or less if they are a good social dancer or not. Man, you can tell.
let me tell you about this really quickly. In these TV shows, there are Dancing with the Stars and all these things. We started having samba de gafieira, we started having bolero, we started having Brazilian Zouk, and you have highly skilled trained dancers that learn the choreography, execute the choreography perfectly, but you know right away that that person first contact with the dance was the choreography. There is something about the way of executing, there is something about the way in which you do everything that if you only do in a lab-like situation, meaning in a room, practicing with someone, a set choreography, even if the execution is there, there is a missing element. 100%. Totally understand that. Makes all the sense in the world.
For example, today, I'll mention a very recent example. I was watching the Canva keynote that they were showing everything that is new about the Canva app, the Canva website for designs. And everything is scripted. Everything is scripted. But each speaker had a very different delivery. You could tell the ones that do public speaking improvised because they were following the script, but they almost made it feel like it was natural and they were coming up with the words in the moment. But then there were other speakers in the same presentation with the same script that you could tell that they were speaking the words that they memorized. And I think that's a good example of the social dancer who can do a choreography or the dancer who only does choreography. They are only doing and saying things that they memorize to say in this moment. Whereas the other one who is a more experienced public speaker, they can do the text and they can say everything memorized, but the delivery is very much like as if they were coming up with the words in the moment, even though it's not. The commas, the pauses, the breathing is choreographed, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it's like in the language analogy, né? It's someone that, for example, us that don't speak Chinese at all, but we memorize like a text in Chinese. We memorize only and just that text. So we're gonna say it, we're gonna clearly see that we have no connection with the language, which is different from, okay, we load the language a little bit, we can speak it, we can have a conversation, and then we memorize a text. So it will be a very different delivery as well. Super
exactly.
Yeah.
And well, I think that's a good wrap on all of the things that we want to talk about this episode today. And we wanted to share our experience with you guys about us learning other dance styles, us teaching dancers and teachers from various different dance styles, and like bring light to maybe what is the one thing that is holding you back. It may not actually be the other dance style that you've done before, but how you're so attached that is your problem. Your problem may not be the other dance style. It may just be that you don't internalize what you're learning. You just compare to what you already know without actually internalizing and feeling. I find that learning dance and learning movement, I try to focus on how it feels. I'm not saying that I don't think, I don't work on the mechanics. No, I work on the mechanics and I work on the breakdown and all of the smallest details of the muscles and the joints and everything. But I do it through feeling. This feels like this when I do this. This feels like that when I do that. Instead of the angle of my knee must be like this and my hip must be here, which is a very like recipe that you must follow. I kind of like try to cook like a grandmother, like how much salt? Well, you put it in and you taste it. And when it feels right, when it tastes right, that's enough salt,
Exactly.
That's kind of like, but I'm still following the recipe. It's just that you have to be open to understanding that sometimes the teacher is not going to give you the answer that you're looking for. Should I do this or that? What is the angle? And I'm like, well, it depends. For what we're doing today, very specifically, we're turning 90 degrees. So it's ideal that your chest is facing more or less this way, but they don't want that answer. They want to know how different is this from that. Well, if you look at Zouk, Zouk is crazy, just like a lot of other dance styles. The answer will always depend on where you're coming from, where you're going to, what kind of music you're dancing to. Is it faster? Is it slower? Is it more syncopated? Is it more flowy? Are you dancing more contracted? Are you dancing more elastic? Are you dancing for competition, for show, for social? Are you just trying to connect with your partner and nobody exists around you? It all depends. So opening up, understanding that there's so much more than just where does your foot go and where does your chest face, I think can really, really help everybody, us learning lambada or hustle, to understand how to internalize the movement instead of just memorize and execute.
Yeah. And I would add to that the fact that sometimes for many years, something that you were doing in this other dance really works and you achieve success. So that creates confidence. The thing is really try not to assume that that same thing is going to work in the other dance. In this case, in Brazilian Zouk. So sometimes what is holding you back is maybe the acceptance that you might need to change something that you have been doing this whole time, that it truly works for another dance. And sometimes it's a minor adjustment that you do so it works in Brazilian Zouk. So sometimes what holds you back from learning Brazilian Zouk when you have another dance background is sometimes accepting that it is different. It's sometimes just that, accept that it's different and that this thing that works for the other dance doesn't work for Brazilian Zouk, and that's okay. And the curiosity of finding out how can I then adapt. I think this is the bottom line for me, on top of everything that Alisson just said. In the end, it's more of something internal. And I really, truly think that once you change the way you approach things, man, the dances that you have will actually make your life easier.
Yeah, like what we always say, try to approach everything as a student, every student. But I'm going to add something to that. Not just as a student, but also as a beginner student. No matter how professional you are at something, try to approach it as a beginner student, a sponge. Somebody who is ready to take every piece of information without selecting them. Because, oh, you already know this, and this, and that, and this. Don't select. Just take everything like a beginner student, happy for their first dance class in every dance class that you go for your entire life. This is something that we try to apply in our dance and even in our teaching every time. Every time I teach a class, it's like, this could be my first class, so I'm going to be paying attention to the students. I'm going to be listening to the students. I'm going to be getting feedback from the students instead of just delivering the class and assuming everything is going to be fine and everybody's going to get it, you know? So always be open and sucking in the information around you and given to you like a beginner student does, big sponge.
And that reminds me, Alisson, and that's my last thing I'm going to say, something that we already said in the episode about advanced dancers, a quote that comes from a book called Grit.
Love it.
Substituting nuance for novelty is what experts do. And that's why they're never bored. And that's, I think, because you know another dance, if you're listening, you know another dance, if you come with this mindset that the nuance is the new thing you're interested in, you're going to learn Brazilian Zouk so nicely, and you're going to be able to make all this connection. That's what I think, at least. Yeah, so I love to end the episodes and my part with this quote.
So thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode. Beijos, abraços, and ciao.
Bye, everybody.